This is willpower. We're here.
We are here.
Yes, the man, the myth, the legend, the co-founder of the Condor Approach.
That would be me.
Mr. Tah Whitty.
Hey.
I'm so happy to have you here.
Glad to be here.
And I'm happy to be able to share your energy, your spirit, and your vibe with the audience for the podcast because, I mean, you're such a dear friend to me. And you've I say to people sometimes, Tah's my 2 o'clock in the morning man. And people are like, what's that mean? And all I really mean by that is that when I've had challenges in my life that feel insurmountable and I need that 2 a.m. phone call, you're the guy who answers. I try not to ever take that for granted, by the way. I'm not calling you at 2 a.m. all the time.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you and for you, fam. Seriously.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. I mean, you show up so much for yourself when you get into a space where you're jammed up. It's an honor to be there to support you and moving through your spaces.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. You show up for so many people.
I'm
so
trying.
many people.
This is the other reason I wanted to sort of like highlight some of your work, because you have come and spoken at my retreats around the Breath and Cold mentorship. I have learned from you and Cole in the Condor Approach trainings. I have gotten the opportunity and the honor of working with so many, just the most incredible wide variety of personalities and people and energies, and putting people through cold and breath and just learning and watching from you since I moved to Austin. And even before that, my first intentional journey connection was with you and Cole, and really starting to understand the world of psychedelics in a whole way that was different than I had ever experienced before. And so, you know, I love you and we're friends and you're growing me up. And I wanted to share all of the beauty and all of the wisdom that you bring, because you look like you're 25. Welcome to Longevity and Biohacking.
Thank you.
And also, you're probably 27, so it's, you know. I think the biggest notion that I had when I first met you was really understanding some of your background, which I want to share because it's so rich when it comes to your work in the ER. And it always made me feel like I had an extra layer of safety with you. It's really understanding that, and I'd love for you to share any stories, but understanding that you probably have seen the thick of the shit in some of the moments when everything is swirling, right? And some of the worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
And so can you talk briefly just about that period of your life and maybe the ways that that application has gotten you to be standing for so many people in such a strong way?
Well, yeah, I've been a registered nurse for 34 years, just about 34. I graduated from nursing school in 1992. And I started working at my first job at Kings County Hospital, which is the largest municipal hospital in New York City, in Brooklyn, right? And well, not in New York City, in Brooklyn, New York City. And I moved from there to working ER, and I worked ER for 23 years on nights. And I saw everything. When I started nursing, it was on, at the height of HIV. And so I saw people die by the droves in front of me in the hospital. There was a lot of gang stuff going on in New York. People were getting shot. Crack was super crazy in New York. So people were breaking into places, killing people. There was a lot of stuff going on. And so I saw the in and outs of trauma and drama. And after I worked, my second job was 8 years in an ER on Queens Boulevard called St. John's Queens Hospital. And after that job, I wanted to see what it was like to work in different socioeconomic backgrounds, different cultural, ethnic backgrounds. So I jumped from hospital to hospital, and I worked per diem in a bunch of different places to see what it was like, to find out what the commonalities were, because I couldn't understand why so many people were sick, and we had all this health care. And the one thing that I found that was very common that drove a lot of the traumatic dynamics that people were having that were not car crashes and violence were people were lonely. They were alone, they were ashamed, they were hiding, they were lying, they were dishonest. And that was one of the most eye-opening things for me to find. I was really cool with my patients. And I let them, it was the one place that I felt safe as a human being, that I could be honest with everybody. Because I did a lot of lying in my life. I did a lot of untruth, a lot of hiding, a lot of masquerading, a lot of cheating, a lot of really grimy shit in my life. And I wanted to find my way out of that space, and I couldn't. And after a while, I watched the healthcare industry start pushing medication like Lipitor. They were pushing statins for cholesterol. And I did a lot of research on cholesterol to see what the mechanisms were behind cholesterol and why they were pushing statins to where statins didn't work for like two to 4 weeks, but they would give you stat Lipitor when you came to the hospital for chest pain. Why would you need that stat? Like it's an emergency medication. And so I did a lot of research into that. I did research in Advair, which is a medication that they use for people who have COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, emphysema, and they were giving it to it was designed for older people who have those diseases, and they were giving it to people who were young with asthma. And it was just this pushing of medication. And then they started pushing the flu shot really hard, and I started to question things. And so I took the flu shot until they put H1N1 in the flu shot. And when they put H1N1 in the flu shot, I was like, oh, I'm going to hold off. And then some of my colleagues got really sick. 2 of my colleagues couldn't work anymore. They had some weird neuromuscular dynamics where they could not work anymore. And I was like, I'm not taking this shit. And so I started to research that. And I started to see all these things get crazy in New York. And things started to come to a head around between 2008 and 2018 in New York City. We had 18 hospitals closed down. And so I started to see all the ERs started to get really crowded, and people started dying during the flu season. It was crazy. So all the stuff during the last pandemic we had, where they had all the freezers and stuff outside, it wasn't uncommon for that to be happening in New York, from my vantage point.
But they made it seemingly more scandalized.
It was very sensationalized. I mean, COVID was bad. Don't get it twisted. But it was they sensationalized a lot of things. And I saw all this stuff coming, so I was like, I got to get out of here. And that's when I finally left.
Yeah.
And that's when COVID happened.
Yeah.
Because I saw all this stuff come in. So I had a lot of history with not just violent traumas, not just people getting hit by cars. I mean, I've seen all of this shit. People burned. I've seen people hit by trucks. I've seen somebody damn near decapitated, arms, limbs cut off, just stabbed.
And how do you navigate that within your own mental fortitude? Like, is there like taking it outside and getting yourself conditioned to see that, or separating yourself?
No, that's a good question. They don't teach you that.
Yeah.
They don't teach you that in nursing school. They still don't teach you that. And so you get taught what's called nursing theory. And you get taught the theory of nursing and how it works. And then you go in school and you do clinical rotations, which still doesn't prepare you for full clinical shifts. And then when you go for orientation, they do a lot more training, and they throw you into we call it throwing you into the lions. So you go in, you get on the floor, you do all the things, you learn all the stuff, but nobody can prepare you for that first person that comes through the door with their arm hanging off. Nobody can prepare you. Nobody can prepare you for that first gunshot wound when somebody's head is blown halfway off. Like, nobody can prepare you for that. And then you see it over and over. In order for you to perform, you have to shut down all your trauma mechanisms. And that can become a really destabilizing space for you to you have to really mute all that stuff out, or you're going to collapse in the ER, or you're going to shock out. You're not going to be able to perform. So you have to learn to shut that down on your own.
Yeah. And
a lot of the shutting that down comes from being hazed by other nurses, by doctors, by the system. Snap out of it, man up, you need to get stronger, stuff like that will come online.
And some people probably not faring the storm very well, like people passing out or people having, that must happen with some nurses or early doctors or something. It
does, but most nurses and doctors turn to alcohol. Alcohol and cigarettes. Many of the nurses that I worked with in my first years would go outside in the ambulance ramp and smoke cigarettes. I would join them. Let's have a cigarette. I would smoke out there with the other nurses because they were smoking.
Yeah.
But they would go out and smoke. They would go out and drink. Like after shifts, we would work the night shift. And when I was working at this one hospital called Cabrini Medical Center, and EMS, they would come and pick us up, and we would go to this bar that would open up in the morning just for us.
Wow.
And we would go and drink until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And then go home, pass out. And
it's like part of the processing.
Pass out, and then come back at 7 o'clock for the next shift. Shit was crazy. And the suicide rate for nurses and doctors is extremely high.
Yeah.
Extremely high. There's really soldiers, nurses, doctors, then cops.
Yeah.
And cops aren't even as high as nurses in the suicide space.
Wow.
But the amount of pressure that's on people and the shit that we have to see, I've seen at least 1,000 people die in front of me, and most war veterans say they've never seen that many people die.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've had vets say, "Man, there's 4 people in this ER that died here today. I didn't even see that many on my tour."
Wow.
You know, and it's crazy.
Yeah. And it's also interesting, this thing that you say, correct me if what I heard you say as well, is that there was parts of your life that you were feeling like were masked and other things were going on, but you felt like you could be comfortably cool and honest and open with your patients. Like, was that a place for you to sort of practice being really genuinely yourself?
It was the only place that I actually felt safe to be myself.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have to posture for anybody.
Right.
I didn't have to perform. My mother wasn't involved in any of it. You know, there was the first hospital I worked at. My mother was a doctor that was affiliated with the hospital my father worked at, the hospital I worked at. But after that, I didn't have to worry about shit.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't worried about anybody talking anything to me. Any women that I was dating were not associated with anybody at the hospital, so I could do all kinds of crazy shit and just be myself. Mm-hmm. And
probably felt pretty good. Like, it
was liberating.
Yeah, for sure.
But when I started to see the hospital system pushing drugs, like we used to have drug reps that would come in and give stethoscopes with Viagra on it, right? And you'd like get a pink stethoscope with Viagra, and right? And they would give you free pens, and they'd bring donuts and pizza and all this shit, and they would bring these prescription pads that were pre-written for their drugs, and they would give them to the doctors, and then the doctors would get kickbacks for prescribing medications. And so this went around for a long time, and I started to see the pushing of these drugs, and I was like, this doesn't feel honest to me. And so I took a Hippocratic oath to do no harm.
Yeah.
And I saw myself sending people to procedures that I knew they didn't need, right? Yeah. Taking medications that I knew that were going to harm them. And so I started to feel disenfranchised, and I felt like I wasn't being honest. And anytime I spoke up about it, it was always a threat that I was going to get fired or something like that. And when I decided to not take the flu shot anymore, they did their best to persuade me to take a flu shot, and then they made me wear a mask for my last year that I worked in that clinical setting. They had me wearing a mask, and so I would put a smiley face on, but I was the best triage nurse they had, so they couldn't get rid of me.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a lot to it in my career as a nurse that put me in a position where I was like, I just want to help people stay out of the hospital if they can. But why do they keep going back to the hospital in the first place? And there were so many people that would come back over and over and over. It was the same people coming back over and over. And we would just like cycle people in and out. And it's the same 500-600 people cycling in over a 30-day period. Just cycling in. It's just like, did you follow the instructions? People weren't integrating their experiences. It was just like they would give you this discharge instructions with all this medical jargon on it that nobody understood, and just take these medications and go follow up with your private doctor. The private doctors were so swamped that it was the 8-minute session, take your blood pressure, you're fine, bye. You know?
Yeah.
And so
someone told me it's like down to 6 minutes now or something crazy.
It's crazy. It's a turnkey thing. And there were some doctors that I worked with that worked underneath. So there would be an attending, and there would be sub-attendings, and there would be residents that would work underneath the attendings. And the attendings would have 800 patients. And so they would have a staff of all these doctors that would run around the hospitals and be hospitalists and see the patients under their care. And it was just this turnkey operation of just consistent. And I saw scandals. I saw doctors that were prescribing Percocet in large amounts. I've seen doctors get carried out of the hospital in handcuffs.
Yeah.
Like, I saw all kinds of crazy shit in my time working in the hospitals.
And a lot of this feels like it really laid so much of the foundation of the trajectory of your life, right? Getting out of that environment, shifting to the work that you and Cole have been doing with sharing much more about things in the psychedelic space and the coaching space, and really the integration space, which to me is a lot what speaks to. You're saying patients are coming in and out, and they're never fully integrating the challenges or the wins that they're getting in order to make effective change.
Right.
And so can you weave us to like how, there's so many angles to this because I know you so well about like, even pre this time where you were navigating some of your own health challenges, and have said to me in the past, well, I was like thinking and feeling into some of the ways I was showing up and some of the ways I was being honest or not, and how I was like taking care of myself internally was reflected on the outside, and how these shifts happened in your health. So
Well, I mean,
take it away and tell us.
I mean, there's so many things, you know, to kind of shorten things. I had a very tumultuous childhood. There was a lot of violence in my household. I didn't think it was violent until I got into my 20s, and I was like, everybody's household is not like this. There was, you know, beating was a thing to keep you in a behavior space, and then there was, you know, things between me and my brother. My brother was very angry in my direction, and there was a lot of physical violence. And, you know, we've resolved all the things. You know, me and my brother are great right now. But there was a lot of things that he was going through. I don't know what happened to my brother, but we were also, we were at a babysitter whose kids would tie me up and put me in a box and then put the box in a closet, you know, and do crazy shit like that to me. And so I was in a space where I perceived that I was a victim for a long time. And I was terrified of other people. I was terrified to be honest. I was terrified to trust people because what if they hurt me? Like, you know, my mother was putting me around people who would hurt me. Like, I couldn't trust my mom. Like, there was so many things. I went to bed until I was 14 years old.
Yeah, you've told me that before.
And that's when I stopped going to sleep. And so I had insomnia for 30 years. From 14 to 44, I had insomnia. And that's when my lying was at its peak, from 14 to 44, right? That's when I was dishonest about everything. And it started to eat me up. I couldn't lose body fat. I was working out all the time. It was crazy. And I was shifting my diet and nothing would change anything. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And it got to a head when I was ready to leave nursing, and I met Cole. I was in a relationship for 8 years, and I was lifting a patient at the hospital, and I cracked a vertebra in my back and herniated the disc between L5 and S1, and I couldn't walk for 3 months. And I went into this pit. I couldn't work as a nurse. I was doing personal training at the time. I couldn't do that. I was coaching people, couldn't do that. I couldn't do anything. And so all my money went out the window. Like, everything just fell right off. And that's when Cole introduced me to psychedelics. She was like, oh, you know, you're such a smart person, you're pretty brilliant, and I know, you know, you're having a hard time, and I know something I can help tie everything together for you. And I was like, well, what's that? And she's like, a ceremony. And I was like, what's a ceremony? And she's like, you sit in this room with these people, and you sit in a circle, and you take these plants, and you go into the psychedelic realm, and you find yourself. I was like, oh, you want me to do some drugs with some hippie white folks? I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. And so she said, what do you have to lose, man? And I said, I don't know. I don't want to become a crackhead. I was terrified. I grew up in the crack era. Yeah. You know? And so I trusted Cole more than I've trusted anybody, because Cole never flinched, never once, when I told her anything. And so I was like, all right, I'll go. And so I sat there, and she was like, you know, you could always say no before, you know, and I was like, eh. So they gave me the lightest dose of MDA, right? And sassafras. And I was terrified. And I was in a heart opener, I was terrified. I was in a ball, terrified, and I would not let go. And at one point, Cole said to me, you know, why don't you just let go? And I finally relaxed for the first time in my life. I was in my 40s, my early 40s. I relaxed for the first time in my life. And at that moment, I realized that I was a control freak. I was trying to control everything around me, all the people, how people saw me, the outcomes of everything. Everything was this terrible mess of, if people find out who I am, what I am, they're not going to love me. I'm going to be abandoned. People are going to turn their backs on me. I'm going to be shamed. All of it was terror. And at that one moment, I finally, for the first time in my life, just didn't give a single fuck about anything. And I just let all this love in for myself. And I got to go inside. I got to really see myself and appreciate myself for all the things that I had been through. And I had never experienced anything like that before. Yeah. And it changed my whole perspective around things. And after that, I was like, I'm never going to do this again. And over the period of the next 2 weeks, I got into a bit of a contraction where I started to feel really down, because I had this big expansion, and now I didn't know what to do with it. And everything around me appeared different. Everyone, how I related to everything. But they just see you as the same, and they're like, what's up? They saw me as the same person, but I wasn't. Yeah. I was now more of my core foundational self that I've always wanted to let out the bag. So over the next couple of weeks, it got really challenging. So I called Cole up, and she was like, look, I'm going to take you to see this facilitator who's really awesome. And he helped me to integrate. He's like, well, what are you doing to integrate? And I was like, what's that? And so he explained what integration was. And he helped me to integrate my experiences and to not just make meaning out of things, but to actually connect the dots in my environment so that my environment supported the newness that I had walked into. And it made the difference, I can't tell you. And so over the course of the next 2 years, I would go and hold space and volunteer, and I would explore my own things in those spaces in a safe environment with people who knew what they were doing, who knew what integration was about. And I learned all the stuff that I possibly could in the course of 2 years. And then I would go to these experiences and I would sit and people would come and drop down in front of me and they would ask me questions, and I'm like, and they would say things to me and I would ask them more questions, and it would bring up all their stuff to the surface, and I would help them navigate it just by asking them questions and watching their nervous system. And so since I had been in the hospital all this time, I could track somebody's body, their breathing patterns, their skin tone, all of those things. And like, I'm watching them in real time. When I ask the questions, if they contract, I know how to back off. When they open up and fall into settling, I know how to lean in. And so I would ask these questions, and the facilitators were like, how are you doing this? And I'm like, how am I doing what? I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah. It was like an innate ability at that point. Yeah.
And then they started asking me to come to all the experiences. And so I'm like, all right, cool, I'll go to the experiences. And so I would go to the experiences, and I was at this one experience, and the facilitator came, she sat down next to me, and she said, how you doing, man? I was like, I'm great. She's like, take a look around. She's like, what do you see? I was like, well, there's some people over there looking over here. There's some people over there. And she said, do you know why they're looking over here? I said, yeah, because you're awesome and they're waiting for you. She was like, no, those people are here because you're here. And all those people are waiting for an opportunity to talk to you. And you have no idea of the power behind your ability to move through language and observe people. And I had no idea what she was talking about until people started asking me if I would facilitate experiences. And I was like, I'm not a facilitator. And it took a couple of years before I could even lean into that. And then Cole and I went out to Peru. We had our experiences with ayahuasca and San Pedro, Huachuma, and I had more expansions and an ability to see in myself and really build my own self-esteem as to what my gifts are. And when I learned that if I don't walk in my gifts, I can't really tell other people you need to walk in your gifts because I'm not walking in them. So I learned to walk in those spaces, and that's where we started to work with people around integration. And there were some people who were having some really rough experiences with some facilitators in some certain places, I can't say, right? In some certain places, and they would call me and Cole in to come support. And so we found that there were so many pockets of people having these wonky experiences because nobody knew how to integrate.
Yeah.
So I
think that's still a rampant issue. Like it's running rampant through the circles of lots of plant medicine psychedelics as this continues to expand.
Yeah.
And we keep seeing it over and over again.
Yeah.
Not to shade anybody. I think there are actually people who are trying to do good work who don't know about how to integrate well.
Yeah, they don't. Because, integration is not the Broadway show. It's not the sparkles.
Yeah.
It's not the great
Not
feelings.
the peak experience.
It's not the peak experience. It's the intimate space. And intimacy for a lot of people in our world is very challenging. It's very challenging to slow down and meld with something to get your nervous system. I mean, you work with ice.
Yeah.
You got to get people to slow down in the ice.
Yeah.
With their breath, you got to get them to slow down. You can't rush through that. You got to slow down. And it's uncomfortable because people are used to instant gratification, which is one of the challenges with the internet right now and social media, is that a kid can pick up their phone and have an encyclopedia in 2 seconds, and they don't have to write a paper. They have access to all this information, so they don't know how to slow down. And so getting people to slow down is a tremendously important part of integrating. And so down the road, Cole had some pretty significant dreams about setting her. She had all these items we got from all over the world, setting her items up on kind of like an altar in a very particular way, and to take 10 grams of mushrooms at this particular time.
Which is a lot for anyone who hasn't taken mushrooms before. It's like a hero.
This particular strain at this particular time of day. And I was like, all right, I'll hold space for you. And so she did it. And she went into this space, and she came back with very clear instructions to stop what we were doing and to create a format to teach people how to integrate, because of the renaissance that's coming with psychedelics. And if people don't have a format that they can utilize, they're going to have some challenges. So I went and I pulled apart all the data that I had on all my clients, and I saw the commonalities and the things we did, because we didn't have a set format. We had an intake process, and then we took people through experiences, and then we helped them to integrate. It wasn't a set format. And so I created a set format around that, and something that was actionable and teachable that we could reproduce and replicate with people. And it's been awesome.
Yeah.
And that's where the Condor Approach came from.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so incredible. And this whole tagline of integration is not optional. It just runs as a current through so many people, either training with you or knowing about you. And I think it's a reminder, a consistent reminder, just by being there and just from you guys speaking that truth so much into the communities. I interviewed Paul Austin a couple of weeks ago and released that as sort of a 101 primer on psychedelics for people. So we don't necessarily need to go into the what, where, and how about, you know, we covered like the 6 top psychedelics floating around right now. I know there's a lot of politics going on around ibogaine and all of these other things, but just for people who are out in the world who are maybe considering psychedelics or seeing this, but are still feeling seeing the renaissance, but feeling pretty reserved about it. Is there, like, what would be the things that you might tell them if they're like, hey, how do I make a decision for myself if this is something that's right for me?
Well, there's a few things. We actually have a document called Red Flags, and I can hit you with the link for your listeners. It's called Red Flags, and we want people to be able to understand what it's like to pick a facilitator who's going to be supportive of you. And the number one red flag is if your body says that it's an absolute no, and it is a no. I don't care if it looks good on paper and your friends say that this is where to go. If your body says no, it is an absolute no. I don't care if you get right into the ceremony space and somebody hands you a cup of something or capsule or something. If it's an absolute no, it's a no. And this, I'm not talking about coming from a fear space because you're a little nervous. There's a difference between being nervous about something and something being in absolute terror and it being a no.
Yeah, and that's an important distinction for sure, because I think quite often, and I know from my earlier experiences, whether it be, especially with like Aya and working in service in those circles and being like, I will never work service in those circles because I will never make friends with ayahuasca, and like just having a notion of resistance to it, or resistance before I'm going into earlier ceremonies, or even it was a friend of mine that drove me down to be in all circles with you guys, and I was like, pull over at the gas station like 10 miles away. I need to get a water. I don't know if this is a good idea. And just with that voice, I guess, right? But it's appropriate to have some discernment, so maybe a little bit of fear or nervousness because it's an unknown space that you're stepping into. And that is very different than like, oh, this is a hell no in my body. I feel real, like I feel scared, or I feel real deep levels of terror or fear, or this person is an unsafe environment. Because there's always a notion, anywhere I've gone since or around to have these experiences or ceremonies or working in service in them a lot of times, I'm always saying to whoever's facilitating, running it, the shaman, whoever it is, hey, when I arrive to the space, I just want to make sure that you're clear and I'm clear and we're comfortable with the fact that if I walk in and I feel like it's an unsafe environment, then I'm going to have to pull the plug and let myself out, go, etc. And I think that's like, I think sometimes it's been oddly received when I say that. It's not obviously a shun or a shame on the person. Like I think that they're going to put on a bad, environment or have a bad environment. But I think it's important for us to continue to have discernment as facilitators as well as participants in that way. Agreed. So I love that you just speaking that, if it's a hell no, it's a hell no. Yeah. And if you're a little nervous, then that's a little normal.
Then it's standard fare for a person to be nervous about something they've never experienced before.
Yeah.
And if you speak to the facilitator, and the facilitator's like, I totally get that. That may be a person that can turn the tides to where you may start to feel safe. Mm-hmm. That may not be the moment. You may have another moment down the road. But if a person says, oh no, these are the jitters, this is the common, if somebody's trying to convince you to go into a space, run, don't walk, run to the exit, run. But there are plenty of things that I invite people to ask, to do. Number one, do your research. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying you have to be exhaustive about things and get a PhD on psychedelics and stuff. There are some people who will do it. And do a little bit of research on some different substances and see what the substance, ask the facilitator, what will you be taking? Do you know the dose range? How do you dose people? Stuff like that. Because you're curious. And if they say, I don't tell people that stuff, no, absolutely not. And if education is not part of it, then I'd always raise my eyebrow. Now, if you're flying out to South America and you're going to go to the jungle with somebody who doesn't speak your language, you're not going to get a whole, and it's people in the jungle, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to get a whole lot of scientific stuff in these things. So this is where you're going to really have to feel into your intuition around things. But if it's something in the States or you're somewhere, I'm not saying in the States because most things are illegal, and I'm not condoning or the use of any illicit or illegal substances. That's not my bag. So I'm assuming that people who are listening are
doing it where it's legal. Yeah.
I would ask all the questions and make sure I ask all the questions. Where is it going to be? How many people are going to be there? If there's 1,000 people in the room, if there's like 100 people in the room, for me, that's a red flag. There's only so much energy that a person can navigate. And there are places where they do big ceremonies, and I'm not a fan of it, especially if you have a very tender nervous system. If you are a person who dissociates, right? If you have dissociative qualities from trauma and stuff like that, if you get nervous and you phase out, then dissociatives like ketamine are not things that I would recommend, because you may have to go really deep into it because you already dissociate. So a dissociative is not going to do it for you. And ketamine's not actually a psychedelic. It's a dissociative anesthetic.
That's really interesting commentary. It's like good to understand for people, I think, as well. It's like, because there's so many ketamine clinics popping up and doctors and clinicians utilizing this as a tool, that it might be the first thing that's hitting someone is like, oh, newsflash, this is something that you can actually do that's legal, that's condoned by the medical community, and perhaps it's not for them. And I'm not quite sure if the person who would be treating them would have that assessment, because everyone's so different, right?
Yeah, most people that I know that have gone for ketamine, and I'm not putting the kibosh on ketamine, they go in, they do a brief medical survey. They don't really dive deep into people's dramatic dynamics and circumstances, so people don't really know. Most of the people that are administering ketamine that I know have never taken ketamine, which is an issue for me. When people are going for psychedelics, it's like, am I going to take you into the jungle? And I've never been in the jungle. Yeah, I'm a guide, I'm going to take you into the jungle, and I've never been in the jungle before.
Right.
No, I need somebody with a machete, a handgun, a whip, Indiana Jones, and somebody, I need somebody, well, I don't know about Indiana Jones, but you know what I'm saying? I want somebody who's going to be able to Sherpa me.
Yeah.
That's something that's important. Somebody who knows what they're doing. And there are a lot of people in the ketamine space that are just not doing that. Anyway, if you are a person who has been in a lot of trauma and a lot of drama, and you walk around in a state that toggles in and out of dissociation, you may not experience anything in ketamine.
Yeah.
So that would be a place that I would always raise my eyebrow. If you're dissociative and they don't ask you about that, I would raise my eyebrow.
Yeah.
That would be a space for me with something like ketamine.
Is there like do you think that there's one of the psychedelic classes that's a gateway for people to think about or consider more?
The Condor Approach. The Condor Approach is great for integration. As far as and the Red Flags document we have is pretty comprehensive. And there's a lot of really awesome questions on there for you to ask people. Yeah. How long have you been doing this? Who trained you? What's the deepest psychedelic experience you've been in?
Yeah.
What will happen if I freak out? Right? People want to know if they feel out of control. What are you going to do? Who's going to be there? Is there going to be a nurse there?
Yeah.
Is there going to be a doctor on board? What will happen if this happens? Who will alert my family? What will happen if this? There's a lot of questions that people are not asking, and they just go into these things blindly, and since they're going in blindly, their nervous system is looking for something off. If you're a person that has had a lot of traumatic things happen, or if you have a lot of paranoia around things happening, going into a psychedelic experience without safety, without setting up the container first, can cause you to have to be hit with a lot more substance in order to go into a place, or you can dissociate really quickly. There are different things that can happen, and a trained facilitator knows how to get you through those things, how to support you through those things. That's why it's really important.
Yeah, super important for people to understand that, and also just making the decision with enough research, not just like understanding what is the right chemical or plant medicine or substance for them, because that feels to me like a very big decision on the landscape of, people even just watching, How to Change Your Mind or reading the books. And it's like, okay, there's all of these psychedelics in a class that how do I decide? How do I pick which one's best for me, right? So that's I think getting connected with people on the facilitation side, of course, but also educated people and starting to learn on your own time to say what feels like the right specific shift for my body, or maybe what is it doing to my neurochemistry, which that docu-series was super helpful.
Yeah. And another thing that I would recommend is if somebody takes your money before asking you what your intention is, that's a red flag for me. If somebody says, oh yeah, come for the psychedelic experience, they don't know what your intention is, what you're looking to explore, but they're going to give you this psychedelic that can have all kinds of different dynamics and situations, and they haven't asked you what your intention is, that's a red flag for me. Because different psychedelics take you into different places.
4 eyes, baby.
Yeah.
The 4 eyes. The first eye being the intake.
That's right.
Comprehensive intake. I love that. And I've modeled that with all of my like health and fitness and nutrition clients, breathwork clients, sports performance clients as well. This isn't just a conversation only about integrating things from psychedelics or medicines or even, things that have happened to us, which is another big piece of what you speak to people a lot about when you're working in one-on-one coaching. Just the experiences people are exploring in their life, and then how they are navigating to be the very best version of themselves, or how they are standing in a space where they are speaking about themselves not as the victim, but as the person who is accountable and going to make change to be able to walk forward in the way that you get them to do so beautifully. So, because you've been working with a lot of people one-on-one and small groups in this way. Yeah.
I mean, the depth of one-on-one work I do is outside of psychedelics.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I work with people largely in honesty. And me knowing the space of dishonesty really well, I have a keen radar for bullshit, right?
That one of the questions that I got, part of the intake that I added to my intake from Condor Approach, is really that question about honesty. And it's the number one thing that people say to me, like, I didn't really, like, what's my relationship with the truth? That's the question. And that's like the number one, I didn't really know how to answer this. Like, I tell the truth. And so I just want you to address a little bit of that spectrum in there, because I think that that's important for listeners to say, how would they answer that question if you think about it? You know?
What is your relationship to the truth? So I have 2 questions on my intake form. One is, what is your relationship to the truth? And the next is a closed-ended question that says, when it comes to the truth, and then there are some selections. And it's when it comes to the truth, I love the truth, I hate the truth, I stay away from the truth keeps me safe, I hate liars, like all of these things that you can check off all of them. And most of the questions in that space, or it's like sometimes I'm honest, sometimes secrets keep me safe, all these things about secrets. And people that will say in that first question, what is my relationship to the truth? The truth is everything, and everything has to be true, and I hate people who lie to me. And then the next one, they'll be like, sometimes I'm not honest. And so there's this discrepancy in this space, because people want to be honest, but they're taught to be dishonest. And that's the major challenge with 99.9% of the people that I work with the people that were in the hospital that I was telling you were feeling very lonely. It comes from dishonesty. And when you look at the human organism, we are born in truth, right? Our bodies are based on the truth. When we come out, we're crying, we're doing all the things, we want to grab stuff, we want to sleep and wake up, and then we start crawling around, and then we get our behavior modulated and modified for convenience purposes, right? And so if it's if a kid is swatting at something, it's like, no, that's bad. No, it's the kid's behavior. The kid's doing this. Is it bad? And so you teach the kid that something's bad, you modulate the behavior, and then you grow them up in a position where they're dishonest about a lot of their behavior patterns, their facial expressions. Don't make those faces. That's not nice. Mommy doesn't like that, right? Things like that. And so we grow up outside of our design. So we're designed to be in truth and express that truth through honesty. But we are designed in truth, and we are built in dishonesty. So the build is contrary to the design, and that can be challenging. Whenever a person is dishonest, it's because there's a safety issue. Nobody's honest in a space. Nobody's dishonest when you don't
everything
have
feels comfortable. Yeah.
If I'm afraid that you're going to leave me, if I'm afraid that you're going to betray me, if I'm afraid of being shamed, I'm going to be dishonest. And that's how we teach the whole world. The whole world is based on this. Well, I'd say most of the world.
Most of the world, but even like, I mean, I feel like my family was like very much into like politeness and manners. And there is an angle of that is dishonesty.
It is dishonest.
It's like you're doing the thing to follow the structure of what it's like to be polite or in manners, or that's not very nice. But then what's actually happening is you're like morphing into that good girl syndrome or whatever you'd call it.
Yeah, it's one of the most dangerous things in the world. Etiquette. Etiquette is extremely dangerous because it's false. And it's a behavior pattern that's designed to provide convenience, the convenience of how something looks presentable, right? Whatever presentable.
That's why I want you and my mom and I to go to dinner together so that when you can eat with your hands in the fancy restaurant, and she'll be like, how do I do this? How do I navigate this? And then maybe by the end, she'd be eating with her hands, because I feel like you have that energy that could just convince her otherwise.
Yeah, and for everybody that's watching and listening, I eat everything with my hands.
Yeah.
Except soup, I lift the bowl. But so we have this tendency, this propensity to be dishonest. And when we're dishonest, it's because we're afraid. Or there's a threat. And even if you're not afraid of the threat, if there's a threat, you have to prepare to modulate the threat, to get away from the threat, or completely remove the threat altogether. Or prepare for injury, for harm, for death. You have to prepare for that. So that's where your trauma sequence comes online. There are hormones that are associated with this. The main ones would be adrenaline and cortisol. Other things, we have dopamine cycling and all of these other hormones. These hormones are not designed to circulate through the bloodstream all the time. They're designed in very small increments to move through the bloodstream for very specific tasks, to fight something away from you, to get away from something. And if these things are running through the bloodstream over extended periods of time, the body has to recover from it. And so your body is constantly in this recovery space. If you're terrified, it's for your entire life. Now, when I was in my teens, 20s, 30s, I was lying about everything all the time. Even when I was in my preteens, I was lying about everything all the time. So I had this coursing of adrenaline and cortisol all the time. I couldn't lose body fat. It wouldn't come off. This stuff was trickling through my bloodstream, and it was eating away at everything inside my body. My thyroid got wacky. When I was in my late teens, early 20s, my thyroid got really, really crazy. And I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't figure it out. But I did figure out what was going on after I had that crash. And when I was in the psychedelic experiences and all of that stuff, I found out how deeply my body was being affected by this. And I started to explore the dynamics around adrenaline and the dynamics around dopamine. Now, when we have people that are in cardiac arrest at the hospital, if you go into asystole when your heart stops, we get epinephrine, boom. Or if your heart rate is too slow, we get epinephrine, boom, right? And that's supposed to get your heart rate up. And what that causes is vasoconstriction. It causes your increased cardiac output and so on. And this stuff is so diluted, it's 1 in 10,000. There's a big fat syringe, and there's a tiny amount of adrenaline in that syringe, and we have to push it in, and it's diluted. That's how
into the heart.
Powerful. No, we push it into the blood, into the veins.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
The push it into the heart thing is when somebody's heart stops from an overdose.
Okay.
That's a whole other ball
TV
game.
movie sitcom.
No, but I mean, we used to do that in the hospital.
Yeah.
But you push it into the bloodstream, and then the heart, if it's going to respond, it'll kick things up. But this stuff is not designed to be in your bloodstream for extended periods of time. That's why it stays in the adrenal glands, right? It stays on top of your kidneys in the adrenal glands. Adrenaline, adrenals. Dopamine is another one that increases cardiac contractility and increases cardiac output and causes vasoconstriction. Now, dopamine, when we would put the IVs in people, if the IV infiltrated and wasn't in the vein, and the dopamine leaked out, it would kill all the surrounding tissue.
Whoa.
That's how caustic dopamine is.
Wow.
Yeah, it would destroy. Like we would get, you'd have to pull that IV out immediately if you saw it infiltrating. And you'd usually get a black spot because the tissue gets necrotic.
Wow.
And so if you were to leave somebody and dopamine was on a pump pumping into somebody's arm, and it's very small amounts, I'm talking minuscule amounts of dopamine. If it gets into the tissue, it will kill everything. And this is what we have running through our bloodstream. Now, when you have
even more so now than 50 years ago.
Yeah, but I mean, now you have social media, which is going for a dopamine pump, which is not supposed to be circulating the way we have it circulating right now. So I have no idea what it's going to look like in the next 5-10 years, as we are in a position where we have substances, we have supplements that people are trying to increase their dopamine and all of these different things. And then we have these dopamine dumps from social media, and people are sitting in front of these devices all day long. So you have cortisol, you have adrenaline, you have dopamine, all this stuff circulating through your bloodstream in small amounts over extended periods of time, eating away at things. And then we don't understand why we have mutated organs. We don't understand why we have chronic inflammation. We don't understand these things. Why are my kidneys not functioning right? Why am I getting all these stones? I don't understand. There's all of these different potentials that come from having these things in the bloodstream for long term that are not being studied. And that's part of the thing around being dishonest, is when you're dishonest, you are putting these hormones into your bloodstream. And that is part of the challenge. And as I'm working with people one-on-one, and they start
because as we're speaking these things that are coming up, sorry to interrupt, but as we're speaking these things that are coming up, it's like there's a natural chemical. This is like the body keeping score, right? This is like 80% of our system is traveling up to tell our brain from our body, like the vagus nerve specifically, right? So it's like we know somewhere like deep down inside that we're not telling the full truth, or that it's a bend of the truth, and then that is the thing that's then creating the cascade of the chemistry in our body.
Yeah, definitely. And 200%.
Yeah.
And the challenge is the brain, which on the average person is about 2% of your body weight. And when we're awake and alert, but not doing anything, the brain is using about 20 to 25% of the body's resources. So when your stress levels go up, you're using more of your body's resources. So if I have a live for you, I have a live for the camera guy, I have a live for my mom, I have a live for all of y'all together, I have a live for everybody outside. My body is keeping track of that. My brain is keeping track of all of that, and it has to modulate everything. And then it has to get the glands to kick in to move the things to provide me. Oh shit, I might get caught, right? I'm scared. Oh, I have to get this on. I have to modulate all these things. It drives the resources. The brain starts to pull all the resources from the rest of the body. So since the brain is working overtime, it's using most of the body's resources. It's also providing a tremendous amount of waste. Where does the rest of the body get to catch up? If you have a rash on your skin, if you have a cut on your hand, if you have a knee injury that's not a priority.
Yeah.
Your brain is now the priority. Your brain, your heart, your lungs, maybe your kidneys. These things are now the priority. The rest of your body is not a priority. So what happens to your healing factors? What happens to your healing dynamics when you're lying? You're driving your risk for health issues up dramatically. And I don't hear anybody talking about this but me. And every client that I have worked with has been in a position where they've been dishonest with themselves primarily. When they start to learn to be honest with themselves and then bring that honesty to their family and have really dynamic conversations and integrative conversations with their family members, their loved ones, their partners, their business partners, everything in their bodies change because they don't have to hold that anymore.
This is a piece of the dishonesty thing that I think we overlook a lot. It's just like the lying to yourself or lying by omission, right? Not even addressing it. Or you and I have had extensive conversation about how oftentimes getting into relationship with people and then placating to what they want or disappearing yourself, like all of that is really this extreme level of dishonesty with the person you were meant to be. And I think I don't always even frame when I think of dishonesty. I think it's like lying, bending the truth, all of it. But the biggest one I can see as you're speaking is really about how we like look at ourselves in the mirror every morning and say, okay, this is a piece of me that I'm not showing, or this is a story about, let me not use the word story, but this is an honest piece of me that I really would like to be able to speak my truth with, but I can't, or I won't, or maybe I'll just put it off till tomorrow, or do I really feel that way? And instead of going to the people that we love and saying, here's something I feel, because it might feel uncomfortable or it might feel challenging to bring up that conversation.
Yeah. Everything is energy, right? So if you imagine that you are made of energy foundationally in your core, which expresses itself as some form of light, the light inside of you is ready to shine at all times. If you were to encapsulate that and hold it in and hold that light in, that light is still inside there and it's bouncing around in the air trying to get out until it wears out the outside and then it will escape. The light is always waiting to escape. But we put covers and layers of lies and dishonesty and hiding because we're taught that we're not enough. We're taught that we're being too much for people. We're taught that we're problematic so that we can stay small. And what we do is we create a capsule. It's something that I call vaulting. So we create a vault, and there are fat vaults and there are muscle vaults. Some people create vaults from fat. They'll eat and eat and eat, and it makes it a great container to hold dishonesty in. And then there's a distractive space, and there's all this energy. Fat holds energy. It's an energy storage space. Then there are people who do muscle vaulting, who will go and build up the biggest muscularity so that they can be strong behind it, but they still have all of these challenges. And that's when I see people with joint issues, with muscular dynamics, constantly tearing things, because their muscle vault is so challenged to hold all that. And to build a muscle vault, you have to keep feeding it in different ways, and you have to exercise it. A fat vault is different. But we create these bodies around dishonesty, where we could create bodies that are easy, that allow the truth to move out. And when we don't hold it, when you hold the dumbbell in your hand, is it just your hand that's holding the dumbbell?
No.
No, it's your whole body, right? So when you hold a lie, is it just your mouth that's holding the lie?
No.
It's your whole body. Your whole body has to agree with it. So everything has to participate in the lie. And you have to build a body that can hold energy inside. And that energy wants to come out because it's designed to move. Energy moves. It's always in motion.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that's constant in this universe is change and movement and truth. And when we hold that in, it's like holding a rock and then putting another rock and then another rock and then another rock. Your hand's going to get fatigued after a while. And so you use the other hand and that's going to get fatigued. And then you put it in here and that's going to get fatigued. What happens after a while? Everything starts to break down and then everything falls and the rocks are free. Same thing with light. Same thing with energy. Same thing with truth. And I don't hear anybody talking about this. And I'm talking about it a lot more. And I have a book coming out about it, like all kinds of things. Did I tell you about the book?
No. So exciting.
I went for a writer's retreat with this woman named Rachel Jane, and she does something called flow writing, where they get you out of the left side of your brain, and they have to put your pen on the paper and start writing. They give you some prompts, and they have you start writing, and don't lift your pen off the paper for 15 minutes. And then you take a minute off, 15 minutes, same thing. Take a minute off, 15 minutes for like 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And that's how you go for the whole day. I wrote 22,000 words in 3.5 days.
Wow.
Crazy. Yeah.
Wow.
So I have the startings of this book that, do you know Susan Bratton?
Yeah, of course.
So Susan Bratton, I love Susan, right? Susan.
Sex therapist to the stars.
Susan comes.
If you ever see her speak at any conference, Susan Bratton just always brings like all the vibrators and all the double-headed gongs and throws them out into the audience. And like, yeah, she's whip smart and super fun.
Susan came and she was like, we got to have dinner, Tah. So we went and we had dinner at this place in Austin. She gets this big ass back room with this big ass banquet table and we're having this conversation. And she's like, how do you keep your body the way that you do? And I was like, the first thing I do is I tell the truth. I'm honest. I do my best to be as honest as I possibly can. And when I catch myself in a lie, I go back and I clear it up as soon as possible. And she was.
And what does that look like? I know I told you that I like ribeye, but I really don't. I like sausages. Like you go back to the person and you just clear up what it is.
I go back and I say, hey. So I'll give you a perfect example.
Yeah.
I went out for a walk one morning, and I had an ink cartridge that I didn't need. And so I was going back to Office Max. I went to Office Max and I got to the counter and the guy's like, hey, welcome to Office Max. I'm like, hey, I need to return this ink cartridge. He's like, okay, was anything wrong with it? And I said, no. He's like, okay, well, I need a reason to put in where you're returning it. I was like, oh, my partner said she doesn't need this, so I'm returning it for her. And everything in my body was like, that is absolute dog shit.
Oh, that wasn't the truth.
No,
okay.
It wasn't the truth. He was the nicest guy in the world. I gave him my card. He scanned it back. He's like, have a great day. And I went back on the walk and I could not think straight because I had lied to this dude. And so I was wondering how many people a day lie to this guy and are bullshitting.
Like
so
on the returning things?
I went for a 3-mile walk and I came back to that Office Max and I walked through the door and he was with somebody and he was like, is everything okay? I was like, yeah, I have something I need to share with you. And he finished with the person. He came over and I was like, listen, do you remember what I told you when you asked me what was going on with the cartridge? And I told you, I said, I straight lied to you. He said, oh. He's like, oh, okay. I was like, I don't want to lie to you, man. I said, I don't want to broadcast bullshit at your body because there's a frequency to that. And I don't want to send that out to you. And I don't want to hold that. And I work in spaces where I help people in honesty and stuff. And I don't want to be that person to myself. So thank you for having that space for me. He was like, man, I needed to hear this right now. And that truth opened up a dynamic between me and this guy that was really an awesome rapport.
Yeah, yeah.
We had a great conversation. There was another time that I was walking down the street and there was some dude selling, you know, ASPCA memberships. And the guy was like, yeah, you know, you should join the ASPCA. I was like, I'm already a member. Because I didn't want to talk to him.
Yeah.
And I walked up into my place and I was like, I totally lied to this guy. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. And so I went downstairs and I told the guy, and he and the guy that were working with him were like, he's like, that's some real man shit. Like, I've never seen anybody own dishonesty like that. And I was like, that's the kind of world I want to live in. And the kid was like, man, I got some people I need to talk to because I haven't been honest. And so honesty is something that there can be
like begets honesty from other people.
Yeah. So I want to live in a world where we can be honest with one another, where you don't have to bullshit me. You can tell me something that's not pleasant and I can stand that. But we have a world full of people that are so fragile, they can't hear the truth. Like Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men, you can't handle the truth. Like people can't handle the truth. And they'd rather hear sweet lies than a challenging truth. Because the challenging truth might mean you got to change, and people don't want to change. It's inconvenient, so they oppress.
And maybe not even change themselves, but change their viewpoint on you, or change the relationship they have with you because they see you one way and you're actually another. And I think that's the interesting part, is that people have challenges with change. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep, that's the thing. And the truth is always changing. There is no standard truth. The truth is always unraveling. Right? Like you and I are going to be two different people after this interview. Mm-hmm. And then as you meet the next person, you'll be a different person, right? And we are constantly changing. That is the one truth, is that there's constant change in the universe. That is the one absolute truth, that things are constantly changing. So if I'm looking to hold the truth in a box, I'm doing the same thing again. I'm not letting the truth be free. I'm taking a moment in time, I'm putting it here, and I'm indoctrinating it and saying, this is how it should be forever and ever, amen. Mm-hmm. I won't allow it to change. No, I'm not going to allow it to change, which is another dishonest space. And I'm not saying that dishonesty is a good or a bad thing. It's dishonesty, and it's against our design. When we have dogs and we train them to be a certain way, they want to get up and run. But we train them to modulate their behavior for our convenience. Mm-hmm. And when I've told this to people time and time again, let your dog run free. And when they let their dogs run free, it changes their body's dynamics. Because their dogs have been cooped up in a house, they're living outside of what their truth is, what their design is. And when you put them back in the design space, it changes their dynamics.
Yeah. And so many people that you're working with now, is this a big leading space for you to, like, this is where you're leading them down this path and having these conversations, and your one-on-one coaching and the work that you're doing in groups? Leaning into this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, big time. So I call it the fucking 15. Right? Yeah, it's the fucking 15. Because most of the people that I'm working with, they got 85% of their shit together. Mm-hmm. And it's the fucking 15% that they just can't figure out. Right? And so they got to figure that 15% out. And I'm there to support them in finding what that is. And so we go in deep. We unravel all the things. We have the conversations, like I liaise conversations with family members if they can't have the conversations, because sometimes people are so steeped in dishonesty. So you're acting like as a mediator for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. I also do mediation. Yeah. Mediation and conflict resolution and conscious uncoupling of businesses. Mm-hmm. And relationships and businesses. And there are times when a person is so terrified that they can't, like, their physiology shuts them off from being able to say anything. Mm-hmm. I learned this from my relationships with women, and particularly getting into my relationship with Cole. There would be things that I would want to tell her that I couldn't. And so what I would start doing was writing down what I wanted to say on paper, because I couldn't escape the paper. Mm-hmm. And I would slide the paper across the table. And then I couldn't escape, right? And so as I was trying to say something, if I would get jumbled up, I would point at the paper, and then she would read it, and she'd be like, okay, I got it. And then my body could actually calm down.
Yeah, and that's so beautiful as well, is it's like, even in that potential clunkiness, which may or may not exist, but you're writing it down and you're moving it forward. Like I dated a guy for 10 years who's a dear, dear friend of mine now, and we would have a disagreement, we'd have a conversation, and I'm very external, right? You know that about me. I say all the emotions, all the things come up, and then I sort of feel like a bit of it is cleared, or at least I've spoken my piece. And I'm sure even in that, I don't always get everything out that I needed. But he would be like, okay, I'm a bit flooded. If we finally got to a place where he could kind of say that, and then it would be like a day or two later, and he would write me. I always said, don't send me these no subject emails. He would write an email, nothing in the subject line, and it would just be like all my thoughts and feelings about this conversation, argument, discourse, whatever it was, like however heated or not, where he finally, like 48 hours later, could kind of get it out, what he needed. And just getting to that point and me having patience and then me having the understanding of saying it's 48 hours later, I'm like halfway moved on, and being able to sort of backtrack to negotiate that relationship communication dynamic was so interesting. But also he was finding a way, we were finding a way, right? And then hopefully you can close, I don't know, I'm assuming you feel like you've closed the gap with Cole and the sliding the paper across the table, but really just, I think it's a powerful suggestion for people who are beginning to say, how do I speak my truth when I can't necessarily just say it? Because that can feel so hot, right?
Yeah. The first thing is, can you tolerate yourself with the truth? And there's something that I teach at the Condor Approach called the Roadmap to Intimacy. And there are 5 steps to get into intimacy with anything. There's tolerance, which is being able to physically tolerate yourself, right? And so this is what you have in the ice, right? You have to be able to physically tolerate yourself in the ice before you can accept yourself in it. If you can't physically tolerate yourself saying the truth to yourself, you're probably not going to be able to say it to another person. So getting intimate with the truth with yourself is very important. Can you tolerate it? Can you accept that this is the truth, whether it's positive or negative, whether you like it or not? Can you accept it after you tolerate it? After that, am I going to be safe with this truth? Is something going to happen to me? Are there going to be any threats? Am I going to get killed? Is somebody going to steal my car? Is somebody going to break into my house? Like, what is there safety issues? Once you can get beyond that, then you get into vulnerability, which is opening up your truth. Hey, I'd like to share something with you. Are you in a position to hear it? When a person says yes, you receive that information from that person, and then you offer more information out. So vulnerability is open with possibility. I have to be open with the possibility of you not liking my truth, you turning me away. I have to be open for you to be able to be in any of those spaces, and for you to volley this way and throw something back at me. So vulnerability is open for possibility for things to come in and possibility for things to go out. And when you have that going back and forth, you start to have connection. And the deeper and more intricate that gets, you have intimacy. And that can be with talk information, that can be with written information, that can be with touch information, it can be sexual, all of these different things, it's all still intimacy. And that's one of the things that I've found people have the most challenges with, is being able to be intimate with your own personal truth, to see the fine points in it. I don't like this, it feels terrible. This is what the truth is. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to write down all the details and really look at it and get visceral with it myself. Because if I'm going to bring my truth to somebody else, I want to know all the fine points of it. So if they have any questions about it, I can answer it and I can be intimate with it. It doesn't mean I need to like it. Yeah. So that would be the first place that I would always recommend people to go with anything that they're doing, whether it's psychedelics, any transformational dynamic, is who are you? Have you done an intake on yourself? Have you done an inventory on what's going on with you?
So powerful. I heard somebody say, just give a presentation on attachment styles, trauma, things like that recently, and that spoke about a core wound. And of course I'm generalizing, and of course I'm actually speaking about gender, which of course we understand there's so many different on the spectrum ways that we can speak in that way. But this person specifically spoke that male-bodied people having this like default of breeding shame within themselves, and females really breeding or showing up with abandonment, like as their core wounds. And I just wondered if you had an opinion about that statement, or you thought that that's just an overgeneralization because everybody is so different.
Well, our core wounds are based from my vantage point, and this is my current vantage point, which is subject to change because my truth is always evolving. Many of the core wounds that we have come from normalized behavior dynamics and social dynamics. And we build them into male bodies, and then male bodies will have a propensity for certain things. We build things into female bodies and they'll have a certain propensity for certain things. We are built in 2 different hormonal frequency pattern spaces. So the estrogen pathway and the testosterone pathway vibrate in totally different dynamics, right? And we both have, both genders and everything in between have, both sexes and everything in between, male and female, have different hormonal mixes, but the people with uteruses and ovaries have different hormonal patterns than people with testes. I mean, it's a different dynamic. And based on our ideals and gender normal spaces, we can program people over extended periods of time to have a propensity to lean into certain programming dynamics. And those dynamics can be heavily built around shame, heavily built around guilt and abandonment. And I have tremendous abandonment wounds, tremendous. I was also always around my mom, always around my sister. I'm a nurse. Like, I was always around women. So my dynamics around abandonment are extremely large because of my societal programming and the propensity of the people that I've been around. Now, my other friends have a lot of shame dynamics because you're not enough, you're not strong enough, you're not providing enough. And this fits into gender role dynamics as well. Now, I had that with my father, and I had my dynamics with my mother and all the other things. So I had a good mix of both shame and abandonment. But when I look at the female-bodied people that I work with and the abandonment wounds that they have, a lot of that can be around, you have to get a good husband. You have to keep a good husband. And so they're always looking for somebody to leave. And that gets built into the gender role normalization spaces, which can also be baked into ancestral dynamics and the DNA patterns that we have. And so that's the way I've studied things and the way I see things. That's my current lens on.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you for answering that. It's like, it adds a lot of clarity and a bit more color to it. I could sit here for 4 hours with you on the couch and just ask you about 1,000 things. There's just
I love this with you.
So many. I know, it's so great on the cozy couch. There's so many offerings that you have. And so I want to dabble in those a bit. Before I ask the final 2 questions that I usually ask, I just would love to speak a little bit about the offerings that you're putting out into the world, not just with Condor Approach, but the ways you're working with people, coming and presenting in spaces with corporations, companies, and retreats like the ones that I've had, just what your offerings are around for the people who are listening and watching you.
Yeah. So for right now, the Condor Approach, we're doing our last live event in September, which is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Cole has decided that she's moving on. So we're going to be closing down the live event portion. We're still going to have some online stuff, but it's nothing like the live event. You've been to the live event, so there's nothing like it. So that's going to be in September, and that's at thecondorapproach.com. If people want to work with me one-on-one, I work with one-on-one people. I only work with 4 people at any given time. So when I'm full, I'm full. It's a crapshoot. Right now I have 1 slot open and I'm talking to somebody right now, so it may not be open. The next spot opens in July. But my website is calltah.com, CALLTAH.com. And it's a very racy kind of situation where I'm daring you to call me. If you are really done with what you're doing and you're ready to invest in yourself, not just financially, but time-wise, then we can dive in. When I work with people, it's a year-long relationship where at the beginning of that year-long relationship, we sit for 12 hours and we unravel all the stuff. And then we have a relationship over the period of a year where I support you in opening up yourself to all the things that you want to accomplish in your life and getting the things out of the way, especially the dishonesty. That's another way that I work with people. I do small group twice a year, which is a 4-person small group dynamic where we have a year-long situation. We have each one of the people have a 12-hour with me up front, and then we do a 6-month get together with everybody. And that's a year-long container that I do. The next one of that will be in August. We'll start in August. And
you have a women's only event coming up?
I have, the Sis Tah Sanctuary. It's Sisters in Tah. I had a lot of women approach me and say to me that they wanted to do stuff with me without Cole, because they want to go in deep, but they're in this position where they feel intimidated by Cole because she's a very strong woman, and they're like, "Oh my God, I don't want her to think this." And I'm like, Cole doesn't think anything, So it's an event where we get together for a weekend and we unravel all the things. It's an event where you can let your hair down, you can be yourself. We cook together every meal. We cook every meal together, and we talk over food. And we talk over cooking together, and we have a fire pit, and we do a little dance party on Saturday night, and we get into the deep conversations around relationships. There are many women that want to ask me questions about how to relate to men, and they've asked their female coaches and they haven't gotten what they wanted. And so this is where you come and you ask me. I'm in a very awesome relationship with an awesome woman, and we've been through all kinds of things, and we know how to talk to each other. We've been together, we get married every year, and this is one of the things that happens at Tah Sanctuary. People will ask me about my relationship and how we craft it. Me and Cole get married every year. We sit down with poster boards, lay them out all over the floor, and we get into what worked for us this past year, what didn't work as individuals, and what would your ideal partner look like over the next year? What would you look like as an ideal partner? And we write these things down, and we converge, and we compare notes, and we see if this is the relationship that we want, and then we craft that relationship for the next year. Yeah. And as we grow,
it's one of the most tender things that I've heard that you guys do. It's just such a beautiful practice. It's like recommitting to the marriage and the evolution of both of you. Like, I could cry. It feels like such a wonderful opportunity that not many people provide themselves. So I think it's so great that you can share that also with other groups of women and just with this audience as well. Practices to be able to stay committed and connected to your partner in whatever level that feels right to people.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and Tah Sanctuary is fun. It's a small group. I don't do more than 12 people. Summer too? Is it summer as well? That is in June. That's June 27th, 29th. Yeah, it's coming up soon. Okay, great. And so those are the events that I do that are small group things. I also do, like I said, I do conflict resolution and mediation for people who are having challenges in their relationships and they don't know how to navigate it. And 9 out of 10 times they're afraid to tell their partner or whatever. And so I do work with them individually, and then we come together and we have a deep conversation over an extended period so that people's nervous systems can actually drop into it. I've helped a couple of businesses that were really great friends that got in a business together that their whole relationship got corrupted as a result of the business, and they wanted to dissolve the business without all the weird law stuff. And I've saved people millions of dollars by helping them to uncouple their businesses, not just their relationships. Instead of taking each other to court. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're doing such beautiful work in the world, and I think there's a level of specificity in your coaching and a breadth of your knowledge that really is just unparalleled by so many other coaches in the world. So thank you. Anyone that's listening, I think this is the man to call Tah.com. Call Tah.com, and be mindful, I'll probably pick up. And the first thing I'm going to ask you is, are you ready? Are you ready? Amazing. I always close the podcast out with 2 questions. One of them is, outside of the spaces that you typically work, because we do talk about biohacking and health optimization, is there anything that you're doing that you feel is like your number one health optimization or biohacking tool? My number one health optimization tool is my journal. I track the shit out of myself. Like, I really, really track everything. Every night, I have ways of just tracking myself in 5-10 minutes. And then what I do is I go back every week. Every week I go back 2 weeks, every Friday. I go back 2 weeks to see where I was over the past 2 weeks. Every month I go back a month. Then at the end of the journal, I'll go back and I read the whole journal. And once a year, I go through all the journals from the last 7 years. And I can see the trends in what's been going on with my body, what's been going on with my diet, what's been going on with my relationships. And there are certain times where I'll get in some really heavy emotional spaces and I don't know what it is. I go and flip back to my journal the year before, and there's something that always coincides. And it's fascinating. So it's almost as if your body knows as a reflection from like a year ago, this was going on at this time, this season, this light angle, etc. And you're noticing the parallels across the books. Yep. I track my supplements. Or at the beginning of the book, I trend my supplements and I cycle them in and cycle them out. And I'll write what the cycle looks like. And then I'll just subs this morning, this morning, and I check things off. And it's just, how was I sleeping? Did I wear a mask? Did I wear a cap on my head? Did I wear earplugs? I just check these things off. Did I take CBD? And I'm able to trend if my sleep shifts and changes and stuff like that. So this is my best biohacking device. I love that. No one's ever given that as an answer before. And my journal this is my best homie. Yeah. And my journal, it's $150. If you find my journal, it's $150 plus shipping. Do you have a little thing you wrote in there? It says right here, $100 reward plus shipping, call me, and I'll get that to you. It's amazing. I want my journal back. Yeah, I really do. yeah, it's been a wonderful tool for me to keep track of everything that I'm doing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
If you could go back and tell your 15-year-old self, Tah, one piece of advice that would make you live a better life for the rest of your life, what would that piece of advice be?
I would say do exactly what you're doing, because right now, where you are is exactly where you need to be.
So sweet. Tell people where they can find you on social media or anywhere else besides the Condor Approach, and calltah.com.
Right. You can find me on Instagram at Tahfree, Tahfree. On TikTok, it's Tah-Free. I just started TikTok, so
okay, that'll be good.
I'm on Instagram. You can find me at theCondorApproach.com and calltah.com and the Condor Approach on Instagram.
Amazing.
And the Psychedelic Coach podcast. Don't forget that.
Oh, yeah.
Psychedelic Coach podcast.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So good. It's a blessing to have you here. Thank
Get
you so
on,
much
please.
for spending time with me on the couch.
Thank you for having me, girl. Appreciate you.